look at the securities laws. They're meant to protect them at all costs. And Jason, you've been frustrated by some of the rules that haven't changed, and when they change so slowly. But the reason is because sometimes that you want people to make good decisions, and if you give them a bunch of firepower, they're just going to spend it. And what we really did was we gave folks just a ton of money, and what did they do? They acted rationally. They spent it. Yep. And now we have to take it all back. And that's I don't think that's going to be as easy or as simple as people think.
What percentage of the money supply do you think is in excess right now in the United States?
Well, look, I told you this because I wrote this in my annual letter, but it's stunning that, the reason the stock market went up, dollar for dollar, was actually tied to the growth in the M2 money supply. The correlation was 0.92. So for every dollar that the Fed printed, the stock market went up by 92 cents. So, it stands to reason that if the Fed is going to take $3 to $5 trillion of value out, then we have to re-rate the equity markets by $3 to $5 trillion at a minimum. And then you have to re-rate and re-baseline for earnings. And so that's probably another 20 or 30%. It's average salary for an engineer. If that hasn't gone down by now, then it's never going. Now we have $30 trillion that we have to work through the economy, a recession we have to overcome, a war we need to end. And people all of a sudden assume that 2 or 3 rate hikes and 5 or 6 months of headlines are enough. And on the margin, maybe they're right. But from my perspective, it's less a judgment on, but it's just an observation that we're at the beginning of something that just fundamentally has to take some amount of time to work its way through the system. And so I don't understand why anybody would give up their liquidity in this moment right now. Why would you? Why would I give up $100 million of cash in my bank account? I would not do that right now.
Because the cash gives you so much optionality. It's basically
so much optionality.
So you're going to be looking for distress, and this is the thing. So you have a huge amount of capital leaving the ecosystem. Like we know, Tiger is basically out. I mean, they were basically the default provider of growth stage capital over the last couple of years. So you have a lot of liquidity leaving the system, and then the liquidity that's in the system is waiting for distress. So you're right. And
there's like we talked about, there's $250 billion of quote unquote dry powder. I mean, I know Chamath thinks that people are going to give that money back, but there's never been this much venture money.
There's not that much. A lot of that's deployed.
They're not going to give it back.
You think a lot of that's deployed?
Profitable tech, it's got smoked by 75 to 85%. They've been long crypto, that's gotten smoked by 65%.
More, yeah.
I mean, if they weren't using a calculator then, they sure as hell should be using a calculator now to figure out a couple of people grift by so many of these venture firms in running these sketchy deals where they would put in some amount of money. This is my understanding of the scam because it was explained to me. You put in a little bit of equity at some crazy price, and then you get these tokens, and apparently there's no, you can just sell these tokens day one. And so what happens is you price the equity, but it's meaningless because really what you're getting is the right to get some amount of these tokens. The price is crazy. You sell it, and then you just kind of walk away. And apparently, you do these deals where you just rinse and repeat this thing. There's an article, I think it was in Bloomberg, about folks trying to figure out how to get a lawsuit filed against Binance. And the problem was that they didn't even know what entity to sue. It's not clear who owns what and what owns the other and who the ultimate look-through ownership structure is. And it doesn't mean that Binance is guilty of anything, but the article was just, showing how there was a US investor who lost $1.2 million who wanted to file a lawsuit, and they have every right to do that. Couldn't even find the corporate entity to actually file this lawsuit against. So if that's what's happening in a $1 trillion market, there's,
it's going to be a lot of pain.
It's all this gray is going to exist for a long time, and people, if governments really hate it when retail investors lose money, well, watch out because they just had $2 trillion of money.
In the U.S.,
but Jason, it's not illegal. This is my understanding, though. It's not illegal to front run crypto trades. So most of these organizations that run an exchange, right, compete for order flow, and they're able to just look at that order flow, and then they front run the trade, and they're on the other side of that. So they're always making money, and so they were making tens of billions of dollars. All these exchanges were.
Yeah, and then
we've kind of broken the ice, and we're friends again.
I feel good. I feel we're playing as a team again.
You want to redo our intros so you're not being such a bitch?
I don't care. I don't care.
I don't think
can we just move forward? I think we all understand.
I thought you
like
wrote
to be
an
recognized.
Intro. You said that you were workshopping an intro. So do you want to do your intros at the end of this? Or no?
Teenage boys running amok.
Discussion, number one. And then number two is then we pulled and we pressured Europe to really draw a hard line, but then now are kind of working around it so that the countries that suffer the most are Europe. Now, I think you're starting to see the tea leaves, though. Last week, there was a group of European leaders. I think it was Macron, Draghi, and I can't remember if it was the German chancellor or not, and one other person who went to Ukraine. And if I had to bet, I think the message was kind of like, all right, listen, like we need to find an organized detente here, because there is, according to Europe, a Lehman-like situation in terms of economic contagion that could manifest over the next months. So I think that the end game is probably some organized, negotiated detente and ceasefire. I don't think anybody will be happy with it, but I think by and large, Russia is and has won, meaning they've won economically. They're selling oil like it's not, like it's going out of style. It's just not selling it to Europe and to America. They're selling it to China. They're selling it to Africa. They're selling it to India.
India's fine with it. They'll take some.
Well, also, Chamath,
to build on what you said, we engaged in economic sanctions, and I was the first one to say, hey, this could really work, and this could be a roadmap for how to do it. And it turned out this is the roadmap for how not to do it. You can't on the front door say, here are these sanctions, and then walk around the back door and basically open the door for them. These sanctions were so porous as to be like Swiss cheese. We focused on virtue signaling acts like confiscating a plane or a boat or a house, but we didn't focus on the structural things we needed to actually, make the mandate that we believe to be just to come to life. And so Russia's completely worked around it. Their economy effectively, is thriving. So what have we gained?
How is it thriving?
Not only did our sanctions package not work, and not only is the treasury, flailing around now trying to find even more backdoors, we actually opened a very dangerous precedent, which is now we allowed oil to settle in currencies that are not just the United States dollar. And now Russia and China are trading and settling in CNY. That's not good for us. This is not how you preserve the integrity of the basically biggest short.
Germany's got another freaking crisis to fight now. Yeah. And I think you're right. The Western alliance is more than just military at this point. There's this, do I really want to be the economic savior over and over again of my smaller member states? And guess who's going to benefit in all of this? China. Like they're going to look at this fracturing and they're going to be like, great.
By the way, just speaking of China for a second, we talk and we bloviate about our desire for energy independence, and we exclude Tesla from any sort of major meaningful legislation. We trumpet these companies that are just completely woefully behind in building energy independence. We think about like a gas tax holiday, but as like kind of like a something that still needs an act of Congress to pass, even though Congress has said they have absolutely no intention of passing it.